The New York Rangers traded Kaapo Kakko to the Seattle Kraken in exchange for defenseman Will Borgen, a third-round pick next season, and a sixth-round pick next season. In related news, the Rangers don't know what they're doing.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1208 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Rangers trade Kaapo Kakko. In some ways, it really began to feel inevitable. His name had been coming up in trade talks off and on, honestly, ever since the memo went out. And obviously, when the Jacob Trouba trade happened, we knew that, or we had a good idea at least, that the Rangers probably weren't done retooling and tinkering with this roster. But I see a trade like this, and my biggest takeaway right off the bat is that the Rangers just don't know what they're doing. Again, the full details of the trade: Kakko goes to Seattle. The Rangers, in exchange for Kakko, get defenseman Will Borgen, a third-round pick next season, a sixth-round pick next season. And as I mentioned, several reasons why the Rangers don't know what they're doing. First of all, the Kakko healthy scratching 2 days ago, that pretty much set this up to happen. I mean, to me, that was more surprising that he was healthy scratch than this actual trade. The writing was on the wall once the healthy scratching went down a couple of days ago. But, to be frank here, you've got this team of lazy, underperforming veterans who can't be bothered to back check, can't be bothered to fight for a 50-50 puck, can't be bothered to battle along the boards. There's nothing even resembling any kind of grit, any kind of heart, any kind of hustle. These are guys that in many cases wear letters and just are failing to show up on a lot of different nights, the vast majority of nights, if we're being completely honest here. And Kakko, look, as I mentioned in the last episode, we did an episode where we talked about some of the comments that Kaapo Kakko made, and I acknowledged then what I'll acknowledge now. Has Kaapo Kakko lived up to being the number 2 overall pick? No, he has not. But if you strip that away, you just look at Kaapo Kakko, the hockey player. He does do a number of things that help this Ranger team, be successful over the last handful of years. And right now, the thing that he's doing, which the vast majority of his teammates, or now ex-teammates, are not doing, is he's competing. He goes out there and battles every single game. He's mostly been holding it down on the third line. I thought that line that he was out there with for the majority of this season, Will Cooley and Philip Hedl, the three of them, I thought overall did a really nice job together, and obviously a defensive shutdown line as well. But again, you've got these underperforming veterans and guys that are not stepping up as leaders when the Rangers desperately need it. And instead of those guys paying the price with a healthy scratching, or in today's case, a trade, it's Kaapo Kakko. Kakko is the one that gets healthy scratch, and Kakko is the one that now gets traded. I know Mika Zibanejad's got the full no-move clause. There's not really much you can do there. But the fact that Kaapo Kakko in the past has been a fall guy and right now continues to be a fall guy, and finally, this closes the door, obviously, on his career as a New York Ranger, it just doesn't sit right with me. You look at, again, compare him to some of the other veterans on this team. Kaapo Kakko, despite far less ice time, has more even strength points than Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, or Adam Fox. On top of that, I mentioned his line and their defensive prowess. That line, Hedl and Kakko and Cooley, those three, when they're on the ice together, have outscored their opponents 13-2 this season. So again, it just doesn't sit right. And you also factor in the fact that Kaapo Kakko is one of the few players, it seems like, on this Ranger team that actually is accountable. Obviously he had those comments the other day where he actually went off script a little bit just to give generic nothing comments to the media and voice his displeasure with being a healthy scratch. You had that. Of course, at the end of last season, they were asking Kaapo Kakko about his future with the Rangers, and he at that time was an RFA with arbitration rights, and nobody knew for sure if Kaapo Kakko was going to be back, but Kakko was accountable. Kakko put it on himself, the fact that he didn't really have a great season last year, and basically said, I can't say that I didn't get any chances, because he got a couple of different spells on the Ranger top line with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. That's where he started last season as well. But to continue this kind of theme of comparing him to some of his veteran teammates, Mika and Kreider, ever since Buchnevich has left, have had their chance with about 45 different right wingers. I mean, I could go through the list, but we don't have all day. We got to keep the focus on Kaapo Kakko here, and they haven't made it work with really any of them. So maybe that was more of a Mika and Kreider thing than it was a Kaapo Kakko thing. And again, none of this is to say that Kaapo Kakko is like this brilliant superstar player that should be completely untouchable in trade talks. I mean, for the right price, I think you do it. But this wasn't the right price. And again, just the fact that Kakko was giving an honest effort, and there's so many other guys that are not, and Kakko's the one that, again, gets scratched and now gets traded. I think that's part of the reason why there's so many Ranger fans that are upset about this. Not all Ranger fans. Some people don't really get the Kakko love that I guess certain fans have. But again, when you see the way that this season has unfolded, and you see the fact that, Kakko continues to compete every game, now he's gone. That's not an ideal situation. I don't think it's a great look for this Ranger team either. I mentioned just a second ago that if the price is right, sure, you can entertain trade talks for Kaapo Kakko, and I certainly stand by that. The time to trade Kaapo Kakko would not have been now in a season where you're spiraling down the drain. The time to trade Kaapo Kakko would have been last season, approaching the trade deadline, if this Emily Kaplan report is to be believed. And I have no reason to believe that it wouldn't be. She's obviously, got a lot of credibility and does a great job. But Kaplan last season reported that the Ducks had offered the Rangers a package deal that included both Frank Vatrano and Adam Henrique in exchange for Kaapo Kakko and a first-round pick. And I remember talking about this last season when these rumors were swirling a little bit. I didn't want to see the Rangers give up Kakko, but if that really was the offer, if that was those two players for Kakko and a first-round draft pick, I feel like I have to do that. Vatrano and Henrique both would have checked a couple of different boxes. Obviously, Frank Vatrano is somebody that was here for half a season and a deep playoff run and brings a lot of speed, brings some energy, which this team sorely needs. And, of course, last year, they weren't really lacking in the energy department or the Rangers, but Frank Vatrano just gives you that much more of it. One of the few right wingers that Mika and Kreider have had success with, so you bring him back into the fold. I think that would have really given the team a boost. And you would have had Vatrano not last year as just a rental, because he would have still been under contract this year. And I mean, I don't know, would things be as bad now? I mean, I can't believe that Frank Vatrano being here would have the Rangers at the top of the standings right now, but I guess you never know for sure. Bottom line, they would have had him at least last year for the playoffs, and they would have had Adam Henrique too. And Henrique's certainly not a superstar player, but this is somebody, and we Ranger fans know for sure about this. This is somebody that has had a lot of playoff success. He seems to come up clutch in some big moments, and he would have checked the box of third-line center. Of course, they eventually brought in Alex Wenberg for that role. You could have just put Wenberg on the fourth line or something like that. You would have had a much deeper and I think much better team, and a team that maybe could have crossed the finish line last season. But instead, you balk at that trade offer. You don't include Kakko, and that trade never materializes, obviously. And then the Rangers went on to have, what I thought was a very timid trade deadline. You go out and you get Chad Ruedel, who played 5 games, didn't play at all in the playoffs. You go out and you get Alex Wenberg. See, Wenberg, I think, was a nice pickup, and he did play an important role for this team. But if it's going to be a good trade deadline, Alex Wenberg should be like the third best player that you're picking up, not the best player that you're picking up. And that's what he ended up being, because the only other move that the Rangers made was a 4th rounder for Jack Roslovic. And Roslovic didn't do much of anything with this Ranger team. So it ended up being a very tepid, very timid trade deadline for the Rangers. And you had this option that was seemingly on the table, this offer that the Ducks presented to you, and you didn't take it. Partially, at least, because you didn't want to trade Kaapo Kakko. And now, what are we, 30 games into the season here? You turn around and now you trade Kaapo Kakko in a season where everything is falling apart. He's one of the only guys giving an honest effort. And it's not really it's not looking like the Rangers are about to go on some, crazy Stanley Cup run. You could last season certainly believe that the Rangers were in the running. So you wait now and you get far less in exchange for Kaapo Kakko. And you're doing it in a season where things are going very, very badly. You could have traded him a handful of months ago, 9 months ago, whatever it was, and greatly improved your chances of winning a Stanley Cup. And now you're trading Kaapo Kakko this season because reasons. I really don't know why they did it. It just doesn't make any sense. It's one of those moves. It's a trade just for the sake of a trade, And maybe some of the comments that Kakko made didn't do him any favors either, but I think it would probably happen either way. I'll elaborate on that in just a little bit here. But another reason why the Rangers don't know what they're doing, they are a terrible defensive team right now. There can't be more than at most 5 teams in the NHL that are struggling more defensively than are the New York Rangers. They can't get the puck out of their zone. None of the defensemen can move the puck. They are god-awful when it comes to defending the rush. On top of that, they give up far too many odd man rushes, which is a vicious combination. I know that people get on Igor, and, he does need to be a little bit better for sure. But as far as Igor and the list of the problems that the Rangers have right now, I'm not even sure that he's in the top 10 because he's getting hung out to dry in a lot of these games. And you factor all this together and the fact that the Rangers now, or rather, they already did have a terrible defensive team, and now they just made it even worse because they just took one of their best defensive forwards, one of their absolute best defensive forwards, maybe the best defensive forward, and they ship him away for pennies on the dollar. So this terrible defensive team just got even worse defensively, and that's not a good situation either. The other reason why the Rangers don't know what they're doing, in my very humble opinion, with a move like this, what kind of a message does this send to the players on the team? You've got somebody out there who, again, not a superstar player. We've acknowledged that several times in the last couple of episodes and already today as well, but somebody that is giving you an honest effort. While you see, again, the veteran players, these lazy veterans that don't want to do anything, they don't want to put in the effort, they don't want to work for it, they don't want to grind. Those are the guys that continue to get off scot-free, basically. And I know, they were pushed down in the lineup and they dropped out of the top 6. And, guys like Mika and Kreider saw their ice time decline a little bit. But, they're not the ones that are really paying for what's going on here with the Rangers. And instead it goes to somebody like Kaapo Kakko. So that kind of begs the question of, who are the Rangers going to blame the next time that something goes wrong? I mean, they could take Zach Jones off the ice for a couple shifts. We saw that not too long ago. But yeah, I mean, Kaapo Kakko was very clearly the fall guy here. But again, what kind of a message are you sending to guys like Bilt Rewards, who's up here and has been, something of a buzzsaw for this Ranger team? He's still kind of finding his way in the NHL, but I think you have to like what you've seen from him so far. What kind of a message does this send to a young player like Filip Chytil? Chytil is now the third longest tenured Ranger, but he is still just 25. This dude is out there putting his career on the line to drive to the net and take a big hit to try to score a goal. And again, one of his fellow hardworking younger players is the guy that gets scratched and the guy that gets traded. Lafreniere, same thing. I mean, he hasn't been great lately. We know that, but it looks like he's coming out of it a little bit at least. Again, I just do not like the message that this sends from the Ranger brass to the players. It's really just as simple as that. And it leads me to believe that the Rangers don't know what they're doing because they make Kaapo Kakko, of all people, the fall guy in this situation. But we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to shift our attention to the comments that Kaapo Kakko made the other day and kind of debate whether or not that may have sealed Kakko's fate as far as him being traded. And we will get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it is hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30 million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, there we go. PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, in the next episode, we're going to be taking a look back at Kaapo Kakko's best moments as a member of the New York Rangers. Wanted to put that in today's episode, but we're just not going to have time for it. And we're also be breaking down whatever happens in the Rangers versus Stars game. God help us all, because the Rangers have completely wasted this soft spot of their schedule, this soft portion of their schedule, and now it's about to get a hell of a lot more difficult. And it's not looking good, to put it very mildly. But back to Kaapo Kakko here. Did he basically seal his fate with the comments that he made the other day? I actually don't think so. To me, as I've mentioned, it kind of felt like the writing was on the wall for this move to be made. Kakko was the subject of trade talk during the offseason. He obviously only ended up signing a 1-year extension with this team. So we kind of knew, even after the extension was signed, it could have been like a sign-and trade kind of a situation where you move him in the offseason. And it's become very, very clear that the Rangers are looking to do some retooling, and they're very serious about this as well. Jacob Trouba was traded. I think that pretty much had to happen. We now have a situation where Kaapo Kakko has been traded, and you got to think that they're not done. There's names that have been out there, whether it's Kreider, or Riley Smith, maybe even Keandre Miller. Like I said, Kakko and Trouba have obviously already been moved. But like I was saying before, the biggest surprise to me is not that Kaapo Kakko was traded. It's the fact that he was the healthy scratch. Once he was the healthy scratch, you could kind of see where this was leading. That Kaapo Kakko, one way or another, was pretty soon probably going to be an ex-Ranger. And that has, of course, come to fruition within the last 24 hours here. Now, again, was it possible, or is it possible, that Kaapo Kakko's comments are the thing that kind of sealed the coffin here, so to speak? I mean, I'll say it's at least possible. I still think it was going to happen one way or another, regardless of whether Kakko spoke up here or not. It's at least possible, though, that his comments pushed Drury to get this deal done a little bit faster than it otherwise would have. But here's the thing about that. I also believe, and I've never believed this in the past about Kaapo Kakko, I believe he very much wanted out. I think that healthy scratching was the straw that broke the camel's back, and he had just had enough. He's been a healthy scratch other times throughout the years. Now, there's times in the past where maybe it's been warranted here and there. Even Laviolette scratched him for a game in the playoffs last year, and, maybe at the time that actually did make some sense. And, the one I really didn't like, though, was, against the Lightning in the conference final when Gallant scratched him in game 6 with the Rangers, their season on the line, and he scratches him in favor of Dryden Hunt. That just didn't make any sense whatsoever, at least not to me. So there's times in the past where maybe it has at least made some sense, but Kaapo Kakko, no way, no how, deserves to be a healthy scratch, or deserve to be a healthy scratch for the Rangers this year. The other thing that I'll mention here is that I'm not going to go through every single quote that Kaapo Kakko gave during, that meeting with the media that he had when, he basically voiced his discontent about the fact that he was indeed named a healthy scratch in a recent game. I'm not going to go through every single quote again, but what I will say in Kakko's defense about everything there, he was not wrong, I don't think, about anything that he said when it came to his critique of Ranger management, maybe even some shots fired at his teammates. Said a lot of different things during that meeting with the media members. The one that really stood out, the one that I think really got the attention of some Ranger fans for sure, is when he said that he hadn't been the worst player, but he's the one that's now out of the lineup. And when he said that, that's kind of when it sounded like, okay, this might actually be shots fired at the veteran players on the New York Rangers. And again, I think this is another reason why fans are, for the most part, very much against this trade, because Kaapo Kakko actually had the guts to call out the Rangers on their nonsense. It doesn't make any sense that somebody that's going out there and putting in the effort night after night after night is the guy that ends up getting scratched, is the guy that ends up getting traded. That just, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And, him saying that he hasn't been the worst player, it kind of speaks to the idea that maybe there is some kind of a divide in that locker room right now. Because as we've mentioned, these veteran players are doing next to nothing, it would appear, to pull their weight on the ice, to pull their weight off the ice. They haven't, done anything to really rally the troops or anything like that. At a certain point, somebody needs to step up as the leader of this team. Hopefully multiple guys would do it, but right now it's just not happening. And again, this did feel like it was a little bit of shots fired at some of the players that aren't pulling their weight, and specifically the veteran players. And had to have been a little bit awkward, I think, maybe if this was indeed a shot at some of the veteran players. And we don't know that for sure. It just kind of reads that way. But if it was, had to have been a little bit awkward for Kaapo Kakko to be out there on the same line as Mika Zibanejad later that day or that night or whatever it was. The other thing that Kaapo Kakko mentioned is that it's easy to scratch the young guy. And, we talked about this in the last episode, but Peter Laviolette came back with the idea that, he scratched some of the older players as well. I don't think guys like Jimmy Vesey and Johnny Brodzinski count that much. I mean, they're 12 and 13 forwards on this team. That's kind of the role that they have. Riley Smith did get scratched for one game, but it does seem like, again, when things go wrong, and this is not exclusive to the Rangers, it's not exclusive to Peter Laviolette, but a lot of times I think for these coaches around the league, it's a lot easier for them to, again, essentially just scapegoat the younger players on the team. Kaapo Kakko also mentioned during, again, this meeting with the media that he was not going to seek out the Rangers to ask them about what they needed more of from him. That to me sounds like somebody that's finally just had enough, finally just fed up with the situation. And it sucks to hear that, because Kaapo Kakko, over the years, like I mentioned, he was very accountable this offseason, talking about how he hadn't taken advantage of some of the opportunities that were presented to him. And the thing that he's been very steady and very consistent about, honestly, ever since he's been a Ranger, is that he wants to be here, likes his teammates, likes the fans, likes New York City, likes winning. It's nice to hear that. It's nice to hear any player mention that they prioritize winning because, you watch sports and you see how everything goes and you see these free agents trying to squeeze every possible dime out of, whatever team signs them, and they have every right to do that. But at a certain point, it's just kind of like, man, does winning mean anything to these guys? So it's refreshing to hear somebody talk about that, as Kaapo Kakko did. And, just kind of a sad ending to this chapter. He just kind of leaves the Rangers now in unceremonious fashion. I think if the Rangers were going to move Kaapo Kakko, the time to do it certainly would have been at the trade deadline. Again, that Emily Kaplan report, I mean, that sounds pretty good right now, doesn't it? Can we go back in time about 9 months or so and maybe pull the trigger on that trade and maybe bolster this Ranger team in a meaningful way heading toward the playoffs and maybe, just maybe, have enough there to get past the Panthers? No guarantees or anything like that. But, yeah, that would have been a better time to trade Kaapo Kakko than now. And, again, just the message to the team is just completely out of whack because Kakko's the guy going out there giving the effort, and he's the guy that, again, gets scratched and then shipped out of town. But we're going to keep everything rolling just a second. I want to shift our attention to Will Borgen, who the Rangers do acquire as part of this deal. Also going to be talking about some of the biggest winners and losers of this deal between the Rangers and the Kraken, and we'll get to that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything going here on Locked On New York Rangers. Want to close out today's episode by doing something that we fairly often do anytime there's a Ranger trade or a big Ranger, transaction of any kind, signing a free agent, whatever it might be, the biggest winners and losers of said trade or said transaction. And obviously, in this case, it's a trade. But we're also going to talk about Will Borgen. We can kind of bunch these two things together here because Will Borgen is going to be our first loser of this trade. It's kind of a cheap shot for me to take at the Rangers, but the way they've played recently, I really don't care. Bottom line, this guy, probably completely out of the blue, finds out that he's getting traded to a team that is now 3-11 in its last 14 games, a team that is in free fall, a team that the effort, the desire to win, the greediness, all that stuff is very, very much in question right now. He is walking into a complete bleep storm completely out of nowhere. At least with Kaapo Kakko being traded, he had to know himself that the writing was probably on the wall, and I don't think there's any way that Kakko would have been shocked when he found out that he had indeed been traded to Seattle. But Will Borgen, I mean, this is just basically a random defenseman on Seattle. He's now got to move across the country, and who knows? Maybe he loves New York City. Maybe he's all hyped about this. But if you've seen the Rangers lately, that's why I've got Borgen as kind of a loser from this whole thing. The other reason why I think Borgen could be a loser from this is that he isn't a lock to be in the lineup every single game with the Rangers. When you look at the defensemen, the depth chart right now, Fox is going to be in there. Lindgren's going to be in there. Can't see them scratching him. They haven't done it yet, so I don't think they're going to do it. Same thing can also be said for Keandre Miller whenever Miller is healthy again. Braden Schneider is going to be in there. Zach Jones, you got to figure he's going to be in there too. That's 5 defensemen right there that I don't think are going to come out of the lineup for any reason, barring a trade or anything. And of course, once again, Miller is hurt right now, but he'll get back in there eventually. So that's 5 spots that are spoken for right there. After that, maybe Borgen is the 6th guy, but he's also got to deal with competition from somebody like Vakanainen, who's here. Chad Ruhwedel is still in the mix as well. Connor Mackey, I believe, got sent down to the AHL, and I know for sure that Victor Mancini got sent down to the AHL as well. But, I don't know for sure, that Borgen is a lock to be in the lineup every single night. That's a lot of competition for one spot, a lot of guys that he needs to hold off. And if the Rangers keep going the way they're going and they just continue in free fall, then there's a good chance that I think they'll get Victor Mancini back up and back into the lineup. And if that's the case, it's probably Borgen who's going to, pay the price for that through really no fault of his own. But yeah, that's why Borgen's one of the losers. As far as Borgen and like the bio and what has he done in hockey. So today, as I'm recording this, it's actually Will Borgen's birthday. He turns 28 years old today. So happy birthday. Welcome to the bleep storm. But he is a former 4th-round pick by the Sabres back in 2015. He went number 92 that year overall to Buffalo. Stands 6'3", 204 pounds, 247 NHL games in his career over parts of 6 seasons with the Sabres and the Kraken. Just 14 games with Buffalo. That was obviously the team that drafted him. In his career totals here, 9 goals, 46 assists, 55 points. He's also minus 15 for his career. He has averaged 16 minutes and 27 seconds of ice time. So that certainly makes it sound like whenever he's been in the lineup, at least far more often than not, he's been a bottom pair kind of guy. The fact that he is that far under 20 minutes a night, that time on the ice just screams third pair kind of guy. So that's probably where he's been. And if he does crack the Ranger lineup, if he does make his debut in the next game, which I believe he will, got to figure he's going to be in that same role. He'll be on the bottom pairing with somebody with the New York Rangers, but also has 287 block shots, 577 hits. So sounds like he's certainly a blue collar defenseman. He'll sacrifice the body and all that good stuff. It is worth pointing out that it seems like he's struggling this year. 33 games, 1 goal, 1 assist. He's also a minus 13, which is the worst of his NHL career. And he has averaged a career low 15 minutes and 17 seconds of ice time. And it's not like the Kraken are this great team. They're on the outside of the playoff picture looking in right now as well. Something else that I found interesting about Borgen, though, very durable player. He has played in all 33 of Seattle's games this season. And if you look at last year, he played in all 82 games. And if you look at the year before that, he also played in all 82 games. So this guy certainly stays in the lineup. From what I can gather, again, I have not seen a whole lot of Will Borgen in action. I have not broken down, hours upon hours of his highlight reel or anything like that. But from what I can gather, it just seems like your typical physical stay-at-home kind of defenseman. Hey, if he can defend the rush, he'll be a hero for Ranger fans by his, 3rd or 4th game here. I am hoping to eventually talk to Erica from Locked On Seattle Kraken. We've done a couple crossovers with Erica in the past, and we can find out a little bit more about him, and I can obviously let her know a little bit more about Kaapo Kakko. So hopefully we can make that happen sometime in the near future here. One other thing, though, to consider with Borgen is that he might not be a Ranger for long. To begin with, he is on the final year of a 2-year contract that carries an annual cap hit of $2.7 million. He will be a UFA when the season ends. But it might not even take that long, because if the Rangers keep sinking and keep spiraling the way that they are right now, we've got a while to go before the trade deadline. So if we're approaching the trade deadline and everything's going south and the Rangers are 10 or 12 points out of the playoffs, there's a very good chance the Rangers would just flip him to another team and take whatever they can get, probably, a draft pick or whatever it might be. We'll see how it goes there. But yeah, I mean, there's really no reason to hang on to him unless you're convinced that you can and want to extend him past this upcoming season. I think it would make sense to flip him at the trade deadline if you're out of the playoff picture looking in and or no longer in contention at all. Anything's possible. Anything's believable. I just mentioned, maybe the Rangers will be 10 or 12 points out of the playoffs. I don't think they'll continue to sink that badly, but watching this team, man, I don't think anything can be really be ruled out at this point either. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. But as far as the other winners and losers, biggest winner of this deal to me is Kaapo Kakko. He gets a fresh start, probably some more playing time, I would imagine, possibly a little more time in the power play. He was on the second unit off and on with the Rangers. Maybe he'll be in that kind of a role with the Kraken as well. We will see. But I think this is somebody that for sure at this point needs a fresh start, and hopefully he can find himself. And I'm rooting for Kakko, once he goes out there with the Kraken. They're actually in action a little bit later tonight. I believe they are in Chicago, so I would think Kakko probably makes his debut for the Kraken in that game. We shall see. A loser from this whole situation is Peter Laviolette. He didn't obviously pull the trigger on a trade, but I felt at the time, and I've mentioned it in this episode, I'll continue to say it right now, that making Kaapo Kakko the healthy scratch, making Kaapo Kakko the fall guy, that really kind of set this whole thing in motion. It led to some comments from Kaapo Kakko, and it ultimately led to Kaapo Kakko now being an ex-New York Ranger. And again, scratching Kakko, that to me felt like just a completely wrong message to send to the guys in the locker room, particularly the other young and hungry players that are giving it everything they've got every single night. So didn't like that, and I think Laviolette comes out of this a loser because of it. Winner, I'm going to say Brett Berard. We've seen Berard move around the lineup quite a bit. He was with Mika for a while, and then he was on the 3rd line, the 4th line, back up to the 3rd line. He's been kind of jumping around a little bit. I would imagine with Kakko now being out of the picture that Berard is probably getting close to being a near lock for the top 9. Now, I'll say that, of course, and they'll healthy scratch him in the next game, or they'll put him on the fourth line and he'll have like 7 minutes of ice time. I hope that doesn't happen, but it would at least appear that the door is now open for Brett Berard to claim an even bigger role with this Ranger team. And again, he's one of the few players giving effort, so I'm all for it. Get this guy in the top 9 and never drop him out of it again. Loser from this whole deal, I'm going to say Chris Drury. Not only does he trade one of the few guys that's playing hard, but he does it for a minimal return. This goes back to that Emily Kaplan report that we talked about earlier in the episode. It sounds like, if that report is to be believed, that they could have packaged Kakko last year, brought in 2 very solid difference-making forwards for this team during the stretch run, the playoffs, and a move that maybe can't say for sure. We'll never know for sure now, but maybe that move, propels the Rangers to even greater heights in their playoff run last season. I think another winner from this, Brennan Othmann, for a lot of the same reasons that I just mentioned when talking about Brett Berard. Again, this is just one last guy that's kind of in the way, one less guy, that's blocking the path to Brennan Othmann getting to the New York Rangers and staying there. Now, of course, Othmann is still hurt right now, but once he gets back, you got to figure they'll throw him back out there with the Wolfpack for a handful of games. I'd be shocked if we don't see Brennan Othmann get some serious run with this Ranger team down the stretch this season, though. And he'll also benefit when the Rangers ultimately trade Riley Smith, which I am beginning to think will certainly happen. We will see. But, Brennan Othmann comes out of this a winner because, again, the path to playing time with the Rangers just became a little bit easier, I would say, for Brennan Othmann. A loser from this whole thing, I'm going to say the lazy Ranger veterans on this team. With Kakko no longer here, I mean, who's going to get the blame when things go badly? When certain players just don't feel like fighting for a puck? When certain players just don't feel like back-checking? When certain players just don't feel like skating hard? Who's going to be the fall guy now? I mean, I guess Zach Jones is still there. You can blame everything on him if you'd like to. But, hey, man, Kaapo Kakko is gone now. This is not ideal for the veterans when it comes to the scapegoating procedure on this team. I think some other losers from this, I'm going to put the 2 of these guys together, Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick. We see these guys have basically just faced a barrage of shots all season. Nobody can defend. Nobody is putting in the effort to defend. This team is absolutely abysmal when it comes to defending the rush. And you watch that Kakko line with Hedl and Cooley. I mean, the offensive fireworks weren't always there, but they were always in the offensive zone, giving our goalies a little bit of a breather, and that is gone now, or at least it's at the point where we're down one of our best defensive forwards. So they come out of this losers as well. It's no fault of their own, but if you think Igor and Quick have been under fire so far this season, well, it's about to get even worse, you would have to think. I would say also a loser from this whole deal is K'Andre Miller. Miller wants this big raise, and despite his play not indicating that he really deserves one, and now they've got a couple of defensemen in Vakanainen and Borgen who are in position, so it's possible, if Miller wants to stay a Ranger, who knows for sure if he does or not, but if he does, they've got a couple of defensemen in place. Obviously Borgen is a UFA, but they've got some other options at their disposal here, so I think he comes out of it a loser as well. But we're going to call it there for today. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com and give us a follow on Twitter as well at LO_NY_Rangers. And thanks as always, guys. I will see you next time.